Hello, everybody. Welcome. Bienvenido. Willkommen. I think that's maybe the German word, but I don't think I've heard it pronounced. This reminds me of, some of the wonderful things that can happen serendipitously in a place as diverse as this, and particularly, I've lived here for a long time, most of my life, probably nearly 40 years, and I never planned to stay here. This was a way station that became, in a variety of ways, kind of like a trap. Although it's a very gilded cage. But long ago I was on the end line coming home, and I saw, like, sort of leaning over the aisle, these two German men, perhaps in their late 20s or early 30s. They were speaking in what I understood to be German. And one of them was eating some chocolate, and he noticed my noticing, as is kind of the way in nature. I think we are all deeply observationally sensitive. I mean, this is a very profound, infinitely rich, complex topic. How we transform under the influence of either observation we are aware of, or observations that are going on but we are unaware of. And particularly surveillance changes our sense of being, and I would go so far as to say it changes who we are, because this idea of static identity is extremely deceptive. So, the man on my right, as I turned around, or maybe I was facing them, not sure. There's seats that go in both directions on the train. And so he broke off a piece of chocolate and, reached out toward me with the chocolate still in the wrapper, right? He was careful not to touch the chocolate directly, right? So he wrapped the wrapper around the chocolate and broke it off, and then reached out toward me with the chocolate still in the wrapper. Which, if you think about it, is a very complex enaction of mutual concern, respect, and honoring, and perhaps even love, awareness, right? The man is demonstrating deep awareness. And so he sort of first gestured with the chocolate toward me, and I nodded, and I took the chocolate, and I said, "Danke." And he said, "Bitte, sprechen Sie Deutsch?" And I smiled and said, "Nein." Meaning, no, I don't speak German, but I know maybe 3 words, right? And I have a close friend, a very beautiful and complex spirit, who I'll call C. And we were talking about a particular relatively masculine concern, right, involving the capacity to make friends with particularly women from other cultures. And he mentioned that he had developed a small vocabulary in a number of languages, right, that resemble, something like what took place with me and the young German men. I remember this event with great fondness. It stands out in my memory, though I do not always. This is the weird thing about memory. Something must catalyze our desire or motivation to recall. Right? And I don't even, if you watch the thread switching in consciousness, in awareness, in cognition, this gives you a very profound and wildly uncommon perspective. Right? And one of the things that I am modestly skillful at is observing transitions in my awareness, my consciousness, my mind. Again, not always. I have to become focused in some way. So, for example, at the moment, I cannot recall what led me to the story about the men on the train and the chocolate in Deutsche. I don't know. And thread memory, it turns out, is integral. So what do I mean by thread memory? So imagine that you're having a conversation, but you're very focused on the specific branch of the moment, which is, of course, natural. And in this situation, you can forget how you got there, right? As if the metaphor is paths or walking, or routes. At the moment I don't recall what led me to the story about the man. Though I remember where I was walking when I was led in that direction. But thread memory, the capacity to maintain an awareness, not merely of the current thread structure, but of the history of the arisal of threads, meaning branches in concern, awareness, motivation, orientation, perspective, desire, in a conversational situation. This form of memory is very crucial to the natures of intelligence and is particularly important in one's capacity to recall dreaming experiences, because dreaming experiences have unusual thread structures, if they can be said to have thread structures at all. So, I am very interested, and I don't sit around cogitating wildly. Rather, what happens is, under certain circumstances, moments of insight arise, and then I explore them. Not the kind of guy that just sits down and studies a thing, generally. There are some exceptions. Rather, I'm the kind of person, the sort of learner, who is a bit feral, and some would say undisciplined, in that I explore the possibility space of learning, and I'm exploring my own nature and interiority through some particular avenue. So like the big questions, right? The nature of dreaming, what is birth and death, why are we here, where do we come from, where do we go, what is the nature of light, what is the nature of time, all of these, sort of deep questions, and they're not merely intellectual questions. And I don't chase them just because I like to get smarter or something. Though I do. I chase them because in a way I'm in love with them, which means that I am kind of helpless before them. I submit to them in some sense. This isn't the only way of thinking about it. I also find them a bit like ski slopes that lead upward, right? One can slip up from one's previous habits and biases and perspectives to positions one never even imagined as being accessible. And this is part of what I mean by insight and my voracious desire to see better. Now, of course, knowledge is an aspect of this, and knowledge isn't only the finished, structured results of experience coupled with analysis. There's all kinds of different knowledge, right? Knowledge is an infinite zoo, much like being and insight and incarnation. And we might think, oh, in this zoo I am a lion. And this isn't entirely wrong if one is a lion, or if one is becoming a lion inside. But the zoo is all of the beings. All of the beings are my body. And this is a form of knowledge, even though it is not the form that resembles the results of intellectual analysis. This is a form of knowledge that arises in my soul or my heart or my spirit or the organs of my soul or my relations with origin and being. By the way, I don't necessarily have a specific topic in mind yet. So I'm just kind of fertilizing the field and seeing what sprouts. Yeah. So, I think it is unfortunate that the topic of mathematics and the topics of physics and biology and many of the physical sciences, it's unclear to me whether psychology is actually a science. And all of the sciences involve imagination and art, right? This idea that now we're just concerned with the facts here. That's bullshit, because it's impossible to interpret data without hypothetical perspective or thetic thesis. Hypo means less, right? A hypothesis is a lesser thesis. A hyperthesis is what we mean. I've never realized this, that hypo was attached to thesis in this way, because it's never occurred to me. And this is what I mean by slipping up, right? You can slip up and end up in a problem, or, you can also slip up and end up in a better position than you were previously. You can literally slip upwards, so to speak. Into, right, is another way of thinking about it. I can slip into a deeper awareness, understanding. Slipperiness is both very dangerous and very compelling in various ways for humans. One of just about everybody's most enjoyable activities turns out to be quite slippery. And slipperiness, like the arousal of physical slipperiness, is the arousal of slipperiness is very profound. Our births, our incarnations often originated with a kind of slipperiness, and not just the sort associated with human reproductive behavior. I suspect we slip down. I have this little joke where, when you see living beings, and they are doing things, and they are very compelled by what they are doing. Animals, and you're much better off observing children, little ones, if you want to understand the nature of nature and what's going on, because most of the adults, exceptions noted, are asleep, right? They are carrying around and supporting a vast structure, right, that defends them from insight and awareness and intimacy and potential. So obviously these people, when they, they find some way to slip off part of that structure with drugs or alcohol or exercise or meditation or deep reflection or music. Or lovemaking, or questing, adventuring, play. These experiences often catalyze disinhibition, which is a very strange word. Right? I have to actively remove inhibitions, something like this. I noticed, for example, that again, with some exceptions, in my ordinary consciousness, if I approach the piano, I feel constrained, right? Very concerned about sort of left hemispheric agendas, getting it right, not making mistakes, doing the best thing, the most beautiful thing, like the idealization of, what quote, should, what I should be capable of, what I should do at the piano. And under the influence of, for example, a small amount of alcohol, different intoxicants have different effects on me. And sometimes they're wildly different. And if it really is state dependent, not state, but situationally dependent. There are situations under which I can drink fairly significant amounts of alcohol and not be drunk. And I remember a situation, this goes to something Robert Monroe was saying in the interview I heard yesterday and today. I can... I remember a situation when I was talking with my friend Andy Kogan in Stockton circa 1980X, and I was fairly drunk, and we went for a walk. We had a deep intellectual conversation, my favorite kind. God, I miss those. Not my favorite kind, but one I deeply prefer. And after about 15 minutes of just walking and talking, I noticed that my intoxication had receded. And I was like, wow, man, I was pretty drunk just a few minutes ago, and now I feel like not drunk. And it was as if the calibration of consciousness affected by our activity took over the otherwise slightly incoherent state of the intoxication. And basically just, remediated it, ameliorated it. And I was very surprised because I thought, if you drink, you're drunk. There's no way to just fix it, change it back to being sober. But there is. There are myriad ways. So now I get to demonstrate my thread memory. When I was talking about the necessity of watching small children, and a particular joke that was shared with me by a non-human intelligence. And slipperiness, right? These are pivots or anchors for the thread origins that led me here. So one thing you will see very commonly if you watch small children in a situation where this is possible for them is that they will get very excited, absolute enthusiasm, about splashing in puddles, stomping their foot in puddles, jumping in puddles, up and down. They don't care about their feet getting wet, the mud, their clothes. They don't care about that at all. They are not thinking about repercussions, right? They are all the way in the experience, in the moment, jumping up and down, splashing in the puddle. And often, though they may not be conscious of it, they are looking at how the reflections of the sky and the world around them in the puddle are obliterated and changed and warped and coruscated by the splashing. And my non-human companion joked about this and said, yes, they're doing something they're already familiar with. And I said, there was no speaking. But I'll pretend there was. I said, really, what do you mean? And he said, well, don't you remember? That's how you got here. You were in the other place. There was this amazing puddle. You started splashing around, and then you slipped right through it into a human body. And we both laughed. Now, there's no truth claim here. I'm not interested really in truth claims in this, mode of concern or awareness or orientation. And I want to remind everyone that it is not merely possible, but very common, to forge figures in the mind which are not true, but deliver more insight than any true statement could possibly deliver. Right? So there's all this, concern about, prove it, show me the evidence, blah, 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 right? And there's a reason and there's a purpose there's a value. Some of that is valuable, but when it pervades over the entire space, now we are in deep danger and trouble, and our minds will shrink, our awareness will shrink. And we will reject all kinds of forms of insight simply because we can locate an objection, right? And then the objection in awareness forms a kind of gravity. We are sucked into this gravity in consciousness, and we're like, well, that's not true. There's no unicorns. It doesn't matter whether there are unicorns or not. The concept of unicorns as a metaphor, as a figure in the mind, is unimaginably profound. There's a brilliant book on the unicorn tapestries. It might be the book, I'm pretty sure it is, The Oak King and the Holly King. Oh, I love this book. It's so brilliant. It's a very exotic kind of book. So it's very important to understand this in a deep and direct way, particularly for those people who like to buzzkill and pervade over, other aspects of the refiguration of awareness and perspectival liberty. They are they think they are the arbiters of the facts. And I know of this because I've been this person. And I've also been the other kind of buzzkill person, where instead of paying attention to the people I'm with and what we are doing together, or what we have come together to explore, I think, no, my ideas are the most important thing. Yeah? How many times have I defected from relational integrity and coherence and intimacy this way? Thousands, at least. So I have all of the, the troubling impediments of being an ego and so forth. And recently these have been drawn in very clearly into my awareness in a variety of rather troubling, but also necessary and medicinal ways. Yeah, figures. The rhetorical elements and the tree of rhetoric. There's a brilliant site about this on the internet that I love. I think it's called Silvae Rhetorica, Silvae Rhetorica. Absolutely integral. We don't train our children in the arts of language, and this is something that I wish I was more disciplined in studying. What are called the figures of speech, the arts of rhetoric, soliloquy, and even sophistry. So, if you want to see what's going on, if you, like me, are hungry to understand more deeply, not perfectly, not completely, but if you want to advance and improve your perspectival faculties and your capacities to imagine, perceive, understand, realize, that's such a funny word because in English, right, there's the onomatopoeia of real eyes. To see with real eyes, which doesn't mean the eyes of our bodies, although those are very real in one register of concern, the register that's concerned with physical stuff. No, real eyes see seeing. They see into the nature and potentials and possibility space of seeing. With the mind, the heart, the soul, the intellect, these organs of our being. And if you want to see and you're curious, I'll tell you two secrets. First, watch very closely. Look very deeply. In a few specific places. One is the features of reproductive biology. This is a relatively scientific concern or perspective. How organisms reproduce, right? Because here you've got an ontological primitive that is infinitely profound, universal, and encodes shapes, transformations, processes, phase transitions that are integral to the nature of physical reality and have been are being practiced by trillions of beings per, unimaginable fraction of a second. So you want to know what's going on, right? You want to understand how do beings arise. And encoded in these processes are not just the physical structures, though the transitions in the structure space are profoundly edifying for someone who can metaphy them, right? Who can take them from the domain of analytical observation and analysis, derivation, articulation, categorization, classification, so forth. Up the slope, the slippery slope of insight, into what they imply from a meta position or metaphorically, what they are similes of, what they are hypostases of, So yes, look deeply into the entire continuum and dimension of the reproductive activity of living beings. Now, if we could see the reproductive activity of the universe, right, also stars, the formation of planets and moons and so forth, systems, and if we could see from above the common human perspective, oh my God, the insight there. But down here in the incarnate space, look deeply into the reproductive activity of living beings. You will find an endless library of insight and intelligences, and the transformation of common ontological primitives that are mostly garbage, or are commonly a lot of bullshit. Then another thing is, if you want to understand, if you want to think about time, this is the reproductive, each of these is very profound, but look into the relationship between a spider and its web, because the web is literally a time machine, except it's not a machine, it's a time prosthesis in a way. It's not even a prosthesis. The web is a transtemporal extension of the body of the spider into time-space. So this is a very, very profound lens. And I'd like to sing the praises of this, but I have sort of another agenda, which is more central to... I'm doing the thing I'm talking about. And then the third thing is watch the behavior of young beings. Look very carefully at sprouts and insect egg cases and their emergence as beings and the transformations they undergo immediately. And particularly the behavior of small mammals. What are they up to? Right? What is most important to small mammals? And, very significantly for us, human children. What is urgently important to human children? Now, lots of things are urgently important to human children. Obtaining the positive observation of parents, guardians, and so forth is very important. But primordially, what they want to do is play with other children. Well, what is this playing thing? Well, it's just about everything that I've been talking about. It is, in a way, the most concentrated and free, while at the same time having a relationship with structure, adventure, right? Questing, self and other, observation, analysis, encouragement, enthusiasm, all of these things. Yeah? So you just watch the human children, especially when they think they're not being observed. Right? If you can get into a situation, and don't surveil them, Jesus. Don't watch them with cameras and things. That's a terrifying, bad thing to do. But if you can be a fly on the wall where children are playing, here you will see the mysteries of being in their raw, beautiful, and conflicted expressions. So these three things, the reproductive activity of living beings, spiders and their webs, which, in case it isn't obvious, is incredible, just to show you the direction to go in. You want to take spiders and their webs into the imaginal, perspectival domain of memory, traps and liberation, threads and thread memory, dreaming, right? Time itself, and how relationships in web-like structures of angles and intersections arise in the physical. This is what I mean by metafication, right? You want to see from the perspective of the implications of wildly disparate phenomena that are here encoded or hinted at or directly available to perception. This is part of the brilliant game of insight. Nurturing, gardening. Yeah. You know, there's some troubling and beautiful features of myself that I have been struggling with lately. And one of them is that I'm something of a natural performer. And this carries with it a broad array of problems and blessings. So I don't really imagine that I have a static self, though I have proclivities and inclinations and so forth that are likely to rise into expression under various conditions. And so one of the things is that I am kind of a natural performer. I have some small experience of being on stage as a poet, and when I was much younger as a musician, but just solo. As a very young child, I was in a couple of, well, not very young, but as a young child, I was in a few plays. I absolutely loved that. It wasn't that I wanted to be an actor. It was that I wanted the experience of being other beings while I am still this being. Acting is a very strange and profound array of arts that I think are, at their best, magical, and at their worst, devastating lies. But this is what most of what the worst of things is. Okay, what's the other proclivity? Oh, yes, yeah. After experiencing what we would think of as aha moments, oh, wow, oh my God, I never imagined this. Beautiful, oh God, fabulous, yeah. Let's get more of this. This is me. Slightly impersonating Amon Hillman. I think he's an amazing and hilarious and brilliant spirit. Excuse me. Throat's still a little froggy. Yeah, I'm addicted to aha moments. And, I hope that in my recordings, my listeners are having some. Oh, I knew that all along, but I didn't know how to articulate it. It wasn't, like I've been aware of that my whole life, but now I understand how a new way of seeing it in my awareness in this moment, right? I'm conscious now of what I have subconsciously been aware of, and I've had the great blessing of many people telling me, mostly on social media, not so much in person, that I have been able to articulate for them. They give me high praise and say, you've said these things that I could never say, and I've been aware of them my whole life. And this is another part of my motivation, right? To speak that which is ordinarily unspeakable and to shine light on that. The awarenesses. Good to see you, man. The urgencies that we experienced in childhood, but most of us either forgot or they became sort of subterranean, right? They were buried. And I remember many of my senses as a child, particularly of a broad array of confusions and defections in the adults, that I promised myself I would remember and one day speak of, right? To do them justice in the sense of being the witness, right? And testifying about these matters. So much of my work orbits something like this, for better or worse, as the case and the listener may find it. Yeah, I'm addicted to aha. Oh, wow. I never imagined. And the feeling, not the idea. Right? What I'm addicted to is the experience of suddenly the clouds part and I see, as if for the first time, some new aspect of awareness or perspective, particularly perspective, right? So I've been listening, let's circle back here to Bob Monroe. He did something very useful during the interview. And he said something that I had never heard said before in this way. He said many amazing things. Now he's a bit of a technician, and he is a really curious person. He's very driven. He was very driven. I suspect he has passed on now, because he was quite old during this interview, which looks like it took place in the 70s or 80s. I know a few people that have studied at the Monroe Institute. Most notably among them is Marla Fries, who wrote the book An American Psychic, which I think is a play on American Psycho. What a brilliant heart and spirit and soul she is, and also what a very skillful seer. Right? We don't usually think much about this word seer, unless, we're very new agey or so forth. And for all of its traps and bullshit, many of the core origins of new aginess have merit and we should be willing to entertain them. But Marla is a very, very skillful seer. The common word we would use is psychic. But I suspect this is wildly deceptive, because I think mostly we've got all of these things backwards. Unity pervades over distinction in time, minds, beings, relationships, and so forth. So it's one mind first, it's one memory first. But I remember Marla leading me through my house and describing the layout. No questions. She asked no questions. She certainly had no knowledge of my house. She told me how many stairs there were in front, what the front door looked like. The layout that she described was precisely the layout of my home. She told me who used each room, major features in the room. She went in a clockwise fashion around the place, and even went so far as to give me a view out the back window. And this was spontaneous. Right? I didn't sign up for this, although she did ask my permission. Well, you're certainly getting a lot of attention. And I was a little surprised at the precision. I mean, she made like 18 statements in a sequence, no questions. I didn't volunteer any information. And I'm aware that there are what are called cold reading techniques. I'm aware of some of these techniques. This was not an instance of that. The fact that some people can simulate non-ordinary skills, which is interesting in itself, and even kind of fascinating, is very different from the also fact that other people can directly demonstrate skills that are actually non-ordinary. And there are those who think, oh no, this is all just a bunch of bullshit and magic tricks. Good for you. Keep thinking like that. If you want to live in a very tiny cage of your potential, the universe is structured in such a way that this will be not only possible for you, it will become more compelling every time you reenact that desire. So yeah, this is a bird with many wings, not one, not two. And all matters are thus. With, appropriate limitations if the context or the purposive orientation is so limited and so focused that there's just, it seems to be what we need is a singular goal. We're seeking a single valued derivation on purpose, and we are aware of the dangers of this, and because of the specific, like, is my door locked? Is the water boiling? Are we okay right now? These are relatively simple, perspectival and purposive orientations. So single valued outcomes are fine there. Now I've kind of lost the thread. Those of you who listen regularly know that I don't believe that we are anything that even vaguely resembles mere humans. This human thing seems to me to be a vessel or a vehicle for a broad array of potential forms of travel, development, reconciliation, memory, and so forth. And most of us is not human. Most of us is probably transcendental to our capacities to categorize or classify it. Though we do have words for such things like soul, ka and ba in Egypt, ak. So I think one of the things, Monroe, okay. So Monroe was saying, and he did something really brilliant. He took a sheet of paper with writing on both sides, and he held it up in front of the camera, and he said, see, this is coherence, right? You can see the face, you can see the whole face of the page. If you zoomed in, you could read the page. But then he began to turn it, right? And he turned it a little bit, and he said, this is decoherence. Now, the letters on this side of the page are available to you, but they're big. And the letters on the far side of the page are not available, or they're blurry. And then he did the most amazing thing, which was he turned the page edge on, right, toward the camera. And he said, now what do you see? It's just a line. You can't tell anything about it, right? This is what I mean by the danger of single-valued, right? We use a knife in the mind when we're being analytical or evaluating. And this knife cuts your mind first. You might think, oh, this is a great, this is a great tool, this is a great prosthesis. It can be. But if you're unaware of its dangers, then mostly the dangers are going to own you. They're going to own your mind. They will limit your liberty. You will become fascinated with cutting, and sewing will evade you. Integrating will evade you. But Monroe said something very surprising. He said, so imagine that you're in a place, and this is a man who has explored very deeply the non-ordinary aspects of awareness and consciousness, mentation, intellect, and has had long conversations with non-humans. And I don't mean aliens. He was particularly interested in talking about a specific friend he had, who he called Inspec. I can't remember what this, what the breakdown of this word, like how he came up with this word. But what he meant was an intelligence of a very unusual depth and profundity, that related with him in a loving and profound and friendly and companionable way. And I suspect, perhaps, this denotation points towards something resembling, in some ways, what I speak of as toy maker. Nonetheless, what he said was really trippy. He was like, so imagine that you're in your living room. I'm going to change it a little bit, because he said something very weird, I think, and confused. He said, imagine you're in your living room and you're watching TV, and then you begin to think about doing something tomorrow. And what he said was, now you are out of phase in time-space. You are splitting. He didn't say that. I'm using this word because this is something I've discovered. This is one of my aha moments recently, splitting. You are splitting, and you are splitting away from what's going on here with you now into somewhere else. But I would say, like, imagine that you are sitting in your living room quietly with your cat, drinking a cup of tea, right? And then you begin to think, oh shit, I forgot to X, right? Or tomorrow I need to blah, blah, blah. This is a form of splitting, and what he said, which I thought was fascinating, is that, I'm paraphrasing again, your relationship with time is becoming incoherent, right? It is, you're multiplying positions in time, in awareness and consciousness. And this isn't necessarily bad, but it can certainly become very problematical. And then he went on to talk about people who suffer from what we would usually, all of this language, these are all generalizations. There's no actual person here. We're not in a clinical environment. I mean, this is just a way of speaking, but people who suffer from what we might usually think of as psychosis, or what might be clinically diagnosed as psychosis. What's going on with them is that they are compelled to become decoherent in this way, and thus they see things that are not there and are probably not real, though they are real to the person's experience, and we should notice that. And just not real to our experience. Because a variety of splitting processes have arisen in the mind, and they have become so compelling that they cannot recohere. And I thought that's a very profound way of understanding a broad range of consciousness phenomena. And, Monroe, in his way, it was recommended to him when he had his first OBE that he go to India and study with a guru, where these things are, well understood and have been known for millennia. And he was like, well, how long would that take? And the guy said, I don't know, 10 or 15, maybe 20 years. And Monroe was like, I don't have that much time. I have many other motivations. But he became something of a yogi, right? In his own Western, clinical, parascientific way. And what he learned about the nature of mind and consciousness is that, it's something like the nonsense we hear about, like, raise your frequency. It's not raise your frequency. It's produce coherent frequencies, and then understand the lay of the land in what different coherent frequencies present to your access, so that you can intentionally shift, travel, meet, learn, and know the vast universe of minds and beings and times and linkages, the between space of these beings, right? All of this, Space-time itself is incredibly fascinating, but what underlies it is profoundly shocking every time you encounter it, and will never become familiar, merely familiar, right? So this has to do, now I'm going to circle back to a thread way long ago. It's unfortunate about mathematics that we are not shown that it is a way of seeing. Because many of the features of mathematics, and particularly things like calculus, manifolds, Riemannian geometry, the square root of -1, and so forth, these are ways of seeing, right? And we are not educated this way, and we should be. Right? We should educate our children about these matters, because there are figures in the mathematical sphere that are so profound that without them, your chances of becoming intelligent are very slim. Like, that up-slipping into insight is going to be fraught with stickiness and impediments, right? Manifolds are particularly crucial to understanding phenomena, or to being able to entertain multi-perspectival orientations in exploration, right? If we just hear the language, it's useless. If we see the metaphors, it's much more useful. If we see the possible figures that the metaphors give rise to, now we're really getting somewhere. These are manifolds. There are many ways of knowing the humans employ, but they employ them so single-mindedly, so single-purposively, that they are deprived of their actual riches, their beneficence, right? In much of our common experience anyway. I myself am. Yeah. I didn't learn math much, though I have a kind of deep feral relationship with the principles involved. I was unable to understand why math was useful when I was younger. It wasn't until I became a computer programmer and became interested in computers that I dearly regretted not having studied math. And then I learned some mathematical principles kind of naively and ferally, just from experimenting. Because coding, which is very dangerous these days, not like when I was young, when it was still a frontier. But coding is a new way of knowing, right? Coding, like mathematics, introduces you to structured data manipulation and all of these things that have profound metaphoric implications for the nature of our ability to see and learn and know. But if we're just trying to produce programs, right, and that's the single valued goal, we will not see this, right? We can become expert coders and still not see this. But a coder is a bit of a god, right? It's a superhuman ability. And I suspect most talented coders have some awareness of this, though it's unclear to me whether they expand the metafications implied by coding into other domains of awareness, concern, activity, insight, and so forth. And another crucial metaphor, and I'm very itchy when people import stuff from quantum physics or mechanics to authorize or illustrate their perspectives or suppositions about identity, nature, origin, meaning, and so forth. But there's one of these that is very important to me, and it's the concept of superposition. So it's the concept of rising up above the specific appearances, embodiments, physicality, and so forth, to a position where the possibility spaces become multivalent. Yeah? And even a small rise in awareness or thought, consideration, evaluation, perspectival orientation is profound. This is where aha lives. Yeah, this is in this one place. I see from a new angle, or three new angles at the same time, and now insight is arising in my awareness. you know, people are uninclined to suppose that we are capable of achieving superpositions, yet we certainly are. And OBEs are an example of this, what we sometimes call astral travel. Even dreaming is an example of this. Right? Dreaming is an example of a superposition over ordinary consciousness, awareness, localized incarnation, temporality, all of these things. People are like, God, I lost time, I encountered a UFO and 10 days disappeared, and 10 hours became, 5 minutes, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, how could this be? Well, it happens to you every time you dream. You can have an experience of an entire lifetime in what we would think of as a single dream. So what is the actual nature of temporality? It's not as we suspect in our waking experience at all. Although it is relatively natural to our waking experience to make suppositions about temporal linearity, segmenting, and so forth. So yeah, superpositions. These are crucially important idea. Right? And people say, well, what about entanglement? I think that's backwards again. It's not that two things become entangled, though they do. We can, formally entangle them, we think, although realize that quantum physics and quantum mechanics is very young. We had these ideas for maybe 100 years or less. I think entanglement is backward. It's that unity pervades. Entanglement is a special situation where we begin by presuming distinction and then marvel that it's this distinction we presumed is violated. This is very common for humans. So these are some of my thoughts for today. Not particularly well structured, but I really enjoyed the interview with Bob Monroe. I'm also enjoying reading Hannah Arendt's Life of the Mind, and reflecting on having recently finished E.A. McGilchrist's The Matter with Things. I'm still watching Age of Disclosure. I'm probably 2/3 of the way through it. There's some interesting discussion of superpositions, particularly by Hal Puthoff in there. Or something resembling a sustained modal superposition. So funny, I just walked by a guy with a t-shirt with a bunch of geometric figures all over it, and it says, do I really need all these cubes? Kind of synchronistic. So this is where I'm at today. I'm so grateful to have this time together for those of you whose passion and curiosity and sense of wonder and adventure incline you to participate in the channel. Please take a moment to like, share, ask a question, share some of your own insights or experiences. Level a criticism, whatever feels natural. Deeply appreciative to all of you who listen, and particularly to those who make it to the end of the recording. You are a special cohort. You are my superheroes. You follow me all the way through. I love that. Yeah, thank you. Deeply grateful to be alive, and I honor and acknowledge all of the beings who came before and will come after me, who seek insight and liberation, and are altruistically motivated to save living beings, rescue them and liberate them and enlighten them and heal them and love them. This is the way. Yeah. So thank you for joining me. I wish you beauty, liberation, insight, amazing dreaming, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.